The story that we have today, I want to talk about a little bit. For those of you who are familiar with this passage, some of the words might have sounded a little different to you. And the reason for that is just recently there has been an updated translation of the New Revised Standard Version. Now, the ELCA that we are a part of does not have an official translation, but typically in our circles and a lot of our resources use the New Revised Standard Version. However, new is a little less true than it used to be. So they've come up with this clever name for it. It's called the New Revised Standard Version, Updated Edition. So I understand 2.0 was on the table for a while, but they didn't go with it. It is the updated edition. So you're going to see us over the second half of this year begin to transition to using that. Most often you will hear that used for the reading of the gospel text, but as we begin to move through, you'll begin to hear stories that are very familiar to you, but you're like, that's a slightly different rendering of it. And the thing that I have enjoyed in preparing sermons is how sometimes a new word in a familiar spot jogs some different thinking about stories that we have heard regularly. So at any rate, so that is something, if you are super excited about that idea, the Lutheran Study Edition is out in the NRSV UE, so you can go to Augsburg Fortress Online and pick that up if you'd like to. It's a great translation and a great study Bible, so for whatever that's worth. You'll hear more about it in the fall as we begin the transition more in earnest. So today we're talking about prayers. I know that you are probably thinking through the three readings today that you were hoping for a sermon on either circumcision or whoredom, but I chose not to go in that direction and to go with the gospel text for today. When we look at the reading that we have, John's disciples, clearly from what is said here, have been taught how to pray. And so Jesus' disciples come to him and say, hey, John's disciples have already had this lesson. Can we get this lesson? And we get language that is familiar to us as the Lord's Prayer. Now, we as Lutheran Christians historically have prayed this a little differently. We often like to say forever and ever, which is when you can tell the Lutherans in the room because we're the ones still talking when everyone else has stopped. But when we talk about the Lord's Prayer, there are a few things that kind of land on me today as we think about it. One is that Jesus teaches us what to say. And what I was referencing in the children's sermon is this idea that we also need to be listening when we think of our lives in prayer. Imagine a phone call where you're just talking, and then just hang it up. Certainly, being silent, listening to music in worship or elsewhere, being in nature, having opportunities to meditate, walking the labyrinth. There are any number of ways in which our heart begins to listen using all of our senses, that we might have experiences that help us understand what God is calling us to be about. When I was in seminary my last year, and I know I've mentioned this story before, but when you go through the assignment process, they ask you, where would you like to go? And we said, California would be fabulous. And they said, awesome, we'll see you in Northwest Minnesota. And I said, okay. And so I spent 5 awesome, lovely years in Northwest Minnesota because God was speaking to me, and it took me a half a second to listen. And so it's one of those things that we have to be attuned to. We have to listen as opportunities and challenges and various things come up. How do we listen? But in the words that Jesus teaches us to say, we also get a sense of an orientation. And one of the things that has been, I would say, clearer to me during my time in ministry, this summer marks 29 years of ordained ministry for me. Call it 30 years just for easy math. So 1995 is when I started. But one of the things that I've noticed about our society during that time period, and perhaps a lot longer, is that we have been vigorously sorting ourselves into two different camps during that time frame. Things that affect what political party we're associated with. Things that affect where we might choose to buy a home or not. Things that dictate what music we listen to, the cars we drive, and the clothes that we wear, so that we can signal correctly to the groups of people around us which camp we sit in. And we have been doing this consistently for over a generation, if not since the beginning of, people. We have done this to identify ourselves. In this day and age, it seems even more, I think the right word would be aggressive, this sense of signaling and this sense of things, that we all have to fit into two boxes, one or the other, A or B, red or blue. You have to be in one of those. And it was interesting at the recent election of Pope Leo, is the sense that the Pope had to fit in one of these boxes. He had to fit in there. The implication being that God fits in one of those boxes. And I heard a colleague once mention, that is too small. It is far too small for our God to be jammed into some teeny tiny box of our own making. That God is bigger than that. So how do we begin the Lord's Prayer? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your kingdom. Do you get to vote? Right? Many of us here, perhaps not all of us, but many of us are citizens of the United States. So in an election in the United States, we would be allowed to vote in that. But as Christians, where is our citizenship? In the waters of baptism, we are marked, in a way given a passport, that we are citizens of heaven. We are citizens of God's kingdom. And what does that mean? It means that it supersedes all of the little boxes that this world demands that we fit into, that this world demands that our churches fit into, right? What's it been just in the last couple of weeks that I've been granted the freedom to tell you who to vote for? So we can all fit in those boxes, right? Where does it go from there? We get this reference then that it's not just about God's kingdom in heaven. Your kingdom come. Your kingdom come. Well, what's that about? Well, you start to get into local and municipal elections, and suddenly you're talking about potholes, and you're talking about feeding people who are hungry, and suddenly you're kind of in God's wheelhouse of what we should be about as people of faith. How do we act in ways that benefit those who are most vulnerable? But as I was looking at resources for the sermon today, there was a word that jumped out, and I know you know this has been a theme of mine over the last several years. Give us this day. Us. Give us this day. Not give me. Gimme, 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 gimme. In a world that is about give me first. and you last if ever, right? Or only the people that I think deserve it, or meet the work requirements, or whatever the case might be. But this idea of give us this day gold, houses. Give us this day our daily bread. Now, we could quickly, as people of faith, say, we have bread. We will share that. And yes, but what this is in reference to is your food. Your food, right? Now, in 94306, we probably don't have too many in our congregation that are concerned about where lunch is coming from today. But we know that there are some places in the world where that is the case. In some places that are perhaps not far from here. And I think today in particular, it is worth saying out loud, the people of Gaza and the horrific condition that those people are suffering under the weight of an overpowering force that has such strength that they could choose to do any number of things. But the choice has been to starve. Give us this day our daily bread. There is this sense that when we get fouled up as people of faith with politics, that we hyper-spiritualize things. That it doesn't really have anything to do with the here and now, tax codes or this, or if people are hungry, or what their immigration status is. But this prayer reminds us that God is concerned about our daily bread, what it's like to live this life in the here and now, and the struggles that people experience. We also get, in the later part of the story that we have this morning, this business of the analogy of the guy going up at midnight and asking for bread. Now, that's hard to translate to this day and age. I mean, that's the kind of thing that would get you on Nextdoor real quick, right? It would be this guy knocked on my door, I called the police. This idea of the middle of the night. Now, you have to think of places where travel would be a little bit more irregular. You would travel in ways where you would seek to dodge the heat of the day. Somebody might arrive late at night. You didn't know they were coming because you didn't see their Instagram reel and, all this kind of stuff. And so you didn't bake enough bread because you didn't know. And they show up, and you go to the neighbor's house. I love the way they're shouting through the wall. No, I'm not getting up. Go away. Knock, 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 knock. Persistence in prayer. I think one of the things when we think about our lives of prayer is that the very last part of the story, knock and it shall be opened, ask and you shall receive. I don't know about you, but that's not always been my experience with my prayer life. Sometimes there are times when I'm thinking, God, I prayed for this last week and the week before and the week before that, and I'm struggling with how this is. But we are still called to be persistent and to listen perhaps deeper when we experience these silences at times. So as you go about your week, be mindful of your citizenship and your primary passport coming to you in the waters of baptism. That when we pray that God's kingdom would come, that is bigger than the boxes that we have created. And that as a citizen of heaven, we are called to be concerned about all of our daily bread, for all of us, for this hurting world. Amen. Please stand as you are able.